Howdy, everybody. My name is Allyster Black with Equestria Daily, and you are tuning in to another episode of The Horse's Mouth. Today, I am joined by My Little Pony Generation 4 director, Jim Miller. Would you like to say howdy to everybody?
Hello, hello. How are you?
We're just going to talk about all kinds of different stuff. Chances are we'll probably at some point end up talking about ponies. And then at the end of all that, we're going to sit down and do a little Q&A with the live audience we have here in our Discord.
Cool.
So jumping right into things, we have a very common question that we ask at the beginning of all of these. I don't think we've won a single episode without asking it. So the people really want to know who is worst pony?
Worst pony.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good question.
Mm.
I'm gonna have to think about that for a second. It's probably the pony who I think a couple times in episodes, like parts of his face were coming off because of flash errors. Even though we looked at those scenes a million times, we never saw them. We found lots of other errors, but we didn't catch that one. I don't even remember what his name. I think it was Blue Note. Might have been his name. He was the jazz pony. Every once in a while, his eyeballs were coming off his face improperly, or his mouth wasn't attached, or something. Yeah, it was weird.
So he's your least favorite because of facial disfiguration. That's
Well, not because of any kind of physical handicap or anything.
well,
Just
no, of
because
course
it's one
not.
of those things where, despite our best efforts to catch all sorts of mistakes and all, we don't get credit for the ones people don't see, but the ones you miss. And that was a pretty dramatic, more than one. I think he's in there at least twice over the course of the season. So
Okay, heck yeah. I don't think we usually it's like people love saying like Zephyr Breeze, or even though he's not a pony, they love throwing Spike's dad in the mix there. So that's a good one. I like that. Before we dive too deep in the ponies here, I'd like to ask: did you ever have like a childhood nickname or anything like that growing up?
oh, it's been Big Jim for forever because I was either tall or fat or tall and fat, whatever you want to take there. Always a bit of a big kid, so
Okay,
Big Jim for since I was probably 5 or 6.
okay, dope. I thought it would we would have gotten like some sort of like '80s rap name or something. That's usually the go-to. So
No, definitely too white and not cool enough for anything fun like that.
oh, don't undersell yourself. Everybody gets an '80s rap name. The whiter the better usually. I think it fits, especially these
It's
days.
very true. Yeah, I guess good point.
So I might be mistaken, but I think you might have had something to do with the My Little Pony Generation 4, Friendship is Magic.
Yeah, I was involved just a little bit.
Okay. Would you be willing to tell us just a little bit about your involvement and what that kind of looked like for you over the course of the past
Sure.
long
Well,
time?
I came on to help on storyboards at sort of the middle to end of season 1. This was before the show had even hit the airwaves or anything. They had a couple board artists who had to leave for whatever reason. I don't even remember. This is 12 years ago now. And I came in because I was a board artist. I'd worked on a bunch of stuff before. I most notably was on Cartoon Network's Ed, Edd n Eddy for 10 years. So I came in to help out because Jason Thiessen, the director at the time, along with James Woody Wooten, who was the other director, they knew me. They knew the quality of my work. So they brought me in, and I boarded half of the Cutie Mark Chronicles. I think it was episode 123, I believe. And I did that. I thought it would just be a short one-off gig, but then they needed some help managing the revision team after that. So I stayed on and did that. And because I had such an extensive storyboarding background at that point, when they got renewed for season 2, they asked me to run the whole storyboard department. So I was the board supervisor for seasons 2 and 3, and then the board supervisor for the first Equestria Girls DVD movie. And during that time, James Wooten moved on to another show to direct, and there was a void in the directing chair there. So I moved up to direct with Jason Thiessen in season 4. I was the co-director with him, and then in season 5, he moved over to direct the My Little Pony feature film, and I assumed the supervising series director role for seasons 5 through 9.
Okay,
So
awesome.
a long story.
Yeah, a long, long ago. It's been a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Throughout that
Better part of
experience. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say a better part of a decade for me, which is kind of unheard of in the animation world. Is everything okay? You have to hide from tornadoes or anything?
No, no, no. Thankfully not. Well, maybe. I'm not sure. It has been storming here, but fingers crossed we're gonna be all right. Uh, the experience I'm sure must have been fantastic. And you had mentioned Ed, Ed and Eddie before, so I know you had worked on plenty of projects that have been on screen. Is there anything that stands out to you in My Little Pony as like being like a favorite of your experience while contributing to the show?
I mean, just the fact that I got to work with so many amazing people, from the cast to the crew, and a lot of people who stayed on the project for long stretches, if not the entire run of the show. That was pretty rare and unique, but also being on a show that had such a rabid and deep fan base, like that was kind of a new thing for me, and for a lot of us, just experiencing that kind of fandom. And like I'm sure there were fans of Ed, Ed and Eddie at the time it was airing, but we were up here in Canada. It wasn't airing up here. People didn't know about it. The kind of groups on the internet didn't exist, or if they did, we didn't know where to look for them to know that stuff. So getting into the pony stuff and experiencing this explosion of fans and then conventions and all that stuff, it was exciting and new. And we made, well, I can only speak for myself, but I made mistakes about how I dealt with fans and learned from them, because there's no training on how to interact with the fandom. And I don't think anyone, Hasbro, DHX, Wildbrain, one really understood what it was like on a day-to-day basis on the internet there with all the fans. So figuring it out as we went along.
Fair enough. And I mean, like any internet community, like you said, especially with the larger fan bases, uh, it's quite a wormhole. They tend to be pretty complex, and probably especially so with My Little Pony. Not to mention the fact that it was so viral and it became associated with
Mm-hmm.
pop culture. Um,
Yeah, that was unusual and unexpected. Like, we were all very proud of the work we had done, but I don't think anyone could have accounted for the explosion of popularity and visibility of the show online, especially.
yeah, no joke. And I mean, it really was like a lightning in a bottle, just golden from top to bottom. I mean, everything from the voice actresses to the animation. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of fantastic things about it. Um,
Absolutely.
and from everything I've heard, it was the same behind the scenes. So I mean, yeah, that's wonderful. How has My Little Pony has it helped and contributed to you at all outside of specifically working on My Little Pony in any sort of way?
I mean, I've had the opportunity to go to some places around the world that I wouldn't have anticipated going to. I've been to your hometown, Kansas City. I don't know that it would have been high on my list of places to visit just randomly, but the fact that I got to go there for a convention and see what a beautiful city it was, and I don't know, I really treasure that. Like, again, like Milwaukee, I don't know that I would have gone to Milwaukee before, but Milwaukee's super cool. Uh, I got to go to Germany. That was insane. Because of the show I worked on. Like, there was no precedent for it before the show, and I don't know that there's necessarily going to be that kind of thing for anything I ever work on again, potentially. So that's really unique, and just meeting all the people and seeing them face to face and having them say how much the show means to them. I mean, I got to do these things sort of by association. Like I didn't create the show. I got to move into this position. You know, this is something Lauren created, and I sort of feel like I benefited by association. And sometimes I don't know if it's entirely fair, but it was a lovely experience.
Heck yeah. I mean, it's certainly not unfair by any means. We were lucky to have you, Larson. I mean, everybody that was involved. As I said, top to bottom, there's nothing but wonderful things to be said all around.
I think one of the things about working on that show in particular was that almost to a person, the people who worked on the show really cared about the show. They were invested in the show and the story and the characters. I know not everyone agrees with all the decisions that were made, and there's certain things that happened because Hasbro wanted certain things to happen, but you know, everyone really tried to keep the show at a consistently high level of quality and integrity and do the absolute best we could with the time, schedule, and all that stuff that we had. So
Heck yeah. I'll fix it in post. Yeah, there's a lot of fun tropes that have came from the community. As you very well know, we have a very complex and um, quite diverse set of fans for the show, ranging from anywhere in age to interest.
mm-hmm.
And we've created a lot of things that kind of I think stand out, not only for our community as a whole, but kind of even defining the culture of the internet to a certain degree. Is there any sort of like meme idea thing you've seen from the pony community that you were particularly fond of?
I mean, there's so many. The volume of stuff that would come out every week when the show aired, it was hard to keep up. Like, oh man, I mean, I don't think the show ever like you would never go anywhere without someone saying like 20% cooler. The fact that that just stuck and hit a nerve in such a way that it transcended the show and became a meme, and on I would see it on other um, chat things or in comments below things. It's like, wow, it's everywhere. And it's still everywhere. The fact that I would go to a convention in Dallas and or like anywhere and see not just My Little Pony stuff at the convention, but like out in the wild, people who didn't even know there was a convention going on wandering around with a T-shirt, or uh, you know, I still see stuff every once in a while. I go into a store, I'm like, holy crap, there's some My Little Pony merch that I've never seen before for G4 stuff. So it never stops.
No, it really doesn't. The ride will never end, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And by the volume of fan content we still to this day continue to receive, it's hard to believe, or it's easy to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's impressive, really impressive.
Heck yeah. So you had talked a little about the little bit about the conventions and the traveling and going and getting to see and do different things. Um, is there any like favorite place that you did get to visit? Like you said, Kansas City might not have been top of your priorities, but anything bucket list you were able to fill because of the pony stuff?
I mean, I got to go to New York for the first time. That was really cool. I don't know, just the opportunity to travel and talk about what I do was really cool. It didn't really matter where it was. It was just a thing. If I could squeeze it into my schedule, I was always happy to do it. So just the fact that I had that opportunity was such a special thing, and the fact that people wanted me to come and talk and they actually wanted to hear what I had to say, that was unique too.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's awesome, and I know that I mean as a fan myself, that was one of my favorite things, especially in the earlier days, just getting to hear that perspective. Um, there's a famous bit of mine that actually I found on YouTube. It was actually uploaded of you and Jason, I believe, like going through the audience as like Q&A, about to ask the voice actresses a question, and they invited you up on stage. I don't know if you remember that, but you were pretending to be very shy, and my name is
Oh, that was at, I think that was at BabsCon. Yeah.
It sounds like it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's likely. That was super fun, and seeing those interactions and seeing you guys have fun there and enjoy it was always something that was really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, we all, for the most part, genuinely enjoyed each other's company too. So it was always fun to pop into someone else's panel and mess with them, or have a joke at their expense, ask them a silly question. I don't know. I just enjoyed the people that I worked with, and it was cool. Like, we didn't always get to socialize with the voice actors at work because they would only come in once a week for a couple hours, record their lines, and go. And then I had to go back to the office. So oftentimes at conventions, that was the time I had to sort of chat with them, socialize with them, get to know them a little better. So that was always really fun.
Heck yeah. As far as the voice actors go, I have a question. And I maybe enough time has passed. Hopefully, it's not in poor taste. But we had the leaked um, bloopers reel, if you will, that came out that the
Mm-hmm.
fandom was quite attached to. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that? I don't know how you what side of well, we got a lot of emails about it. People were not too happy when
Yeah,
it came
no,
out. So
I mean, it's always, I can understand why fans want to hear that stuff, but it can make our job very difficult. In a lot of ways, it did. All those leaks made security around how we do our jobs more intense and more difficult to. So, like, just bringing home stuff to review at home became harder to do, because they were worried about where materials were going, accessing the servers for the studio from home in the evening if I needed to check a scene or whatever, harder to do. Um, and, you know, things are said in those record sessions specifically, like there's cussing and stuff, uh, because people get frustrated when they flub their lines or we're having a goofy time, that aren't really meant for the public. And, I don't want to ever have an actor feel embarrassed about what they've said, because it can affect how they carry out their performances moving forward. Um, Part of the job for them as an actor is they need to feel that they are free to say and do what they need to do to get the performance that they feel they need to give. And, I would hate for someone to go after an actor online because they use some bad language that uh, no one was really supposed to hear, and then now they're a lot more reserved in their acting choices because they are concerned that that's the kind of stuff's going to get out. So it's definitely a fine line, because yeah, it's funny and it's cool and it's nice to see behind the scenes, but some of that stuff is kept behind the scenes for a reason. And
exactly.
I think that the tricky thing is they were never officially released. So essentially, they were, for lack of a better word, and I don't really know how to talk about it from a legal standpoint or whatever, but they're kind of like stolen. It wasn't something that we wanted to put out. No one on our end officially put it out, or even unofficially put it out. It got out because someone hacked into the system at Wildbrain, and that's kind of crappy. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I'm happy people get to hear stuff and have fun with it, as long as everyone's happy. I don't really feel like I have a leg to stand on. So,
Yeah. I was curious on your opinion. I know there's a lot of people,
mm-hmm.
they see these cute cuddly ponies, and that's one of the biggest appeal is the genuine almost childhood nature to a lot of the characters and how they're represented. So um, as far as representing that identity, that could potentially be harmful to that. And I know for some people that means a lot, and that might turn people off from the content entirely. So I get the
Mm-hmm.
fear, and not to speak on the security at all, but um, that's something that I knew that came out. It was quite a interesting thing as far as leaks go. We hadn't really seen anything
Yeah,
like that
for
before,
sure.
so I was curious what you thought about it.
Yeah, and I can understand why people would be curious to look at it without knowing what's in it. I don't think anyone other than maybe the person who originally got it looked at it because they wanted something bad to happen to the show. Like, I mean, I'll look up spoilers for things myself sometimes, like I'm not immune from wanting to see that stuff. So I totally understand the impulse.
Certainly. Just to speak on something a little bit more on topic with the show, though. Um,
Hmm.
as director, I'm sure you contributed in many ways creatively to the outcome of the show, to say the least. Is there anything in particular that became a part of the show, or maybe even the culture of the show ongoing that you're particularly proud of or fond of?
Oh, so much stuff. I mean, it really was an amazingly collaborative experience, working with the writers and the story editors and even the board artists. We have all had this sort of capacity of throwing out ideas and then building off of them, so that there's no one idea that I think someone could say that's the 100% me, short of maybe stuff Lauren established from the very beginning. And all credit to her for setting that up from the start. One of the things that I'm very proud of, is the episode with Applejack's parents. That sort of flashback to their tragic love story is something I pitched to the writers in season 7 when we were having some story breakdown meetings, and it was really just a very simple log line, and I had a couple beats, but they took it and ran with it and made it into what it is. That wrote the script is so much better than uh, what I initially pitched, and then the board artist elevated it to a whole new level, and the vocal performances elevated it to a whole new level. And it may be the thing I'm most proud, the episode I'm most proud of, um, on the whole show, just because it really was kind of a long shot that they, not only that Hasbro was willing to let us tell that story, but that that it turned out so well. It's the kind of story that I don't think um, could have really been told too early in the run of the show, because you had to care enough about the characters to want to tell that story. And I think if it had come too much later, it wouldn't have had the same impact. I don't know. It was so much synergy of just coming together in that moment, and it all worked out so beautifully. I'm really happy with it.
It was a very good episode. Um, and the thing that I really admire about that and a lot of other things that the show does is the way you approach it with so much subtlety, with a lot of nuance, with certain aspects that are introduced, whether it be um, the fate of the parents or um, maybe certain relationship quirks, whatever the case may be. I think they're approached very tastefully, uh, and in the times that they need to be, they're approached in such a way that it's not blatant or direct. And it's very nice to see that. Uh,
Well, that was kind of the secret sauce for the show. Was like it was all fine and good to have these funny jokes, and we loved making silly things in the show, but when it came to those heartfelt moments, it was really important to us making the show that they never felt insincere. Like, we would never try to undercut a really important emotional beat with a joke, or have the characters kind of roll their eyes at something emotional and heartfelt. That was something that was really important from early on in Lauren's tenure on the show, and we really tried to carry that forward. It's just, let's keep the emotional stuff sincere. We're not making fun of people talking about their feelings or feeling their feelings. That's something that I think helped elevate the show beyond just another rehash of an existing IP. There was no, it just didn't feel forced.
no, often not. And to speak a little bit about on the influence of Lauren. So she, of course, had left, departed, and Hasbro had, of course, a lot of things that they wanted to introduce to the show. Do you feel like,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, you guys were able to um, keep consistent a lot of the identity she wanted My Little Pony to represent throughout? the show, and how do you feel like it might have deviated from that if it did?
Well, I mean, we always tried to keep her initial what's the word I'm looking for? Like the initial ideas for the characters, the archetypes that she designed for each of the girls, really tried to keep that in mind all the time and not change the characters too much. But I mean, when a show goes 5, 6, 7 more seasons, you kind of have to, you can't just tell the same stories over and over again. Like, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If they stayed the same and we just told the same kind of stories all the time, people would be like, well, this show's boring. It's the same crap over and over. But if you change them, you run the risk of people going, that's not what I wanted it to be when I started watching it. I don't like it anymore. So it's a tricky balance. Hasbro, for the most part, was pretty good about letting us do the kind of stories we wanted to do. There were standards and practices, things that we couldn't do. So you couldn't have people getting punched in the face, and couldn't have cuss words, and like all these things. Like, the show, even though it had this larger fan base beyond the sort of demographic that it was initially marketed for, we still were beholden by the constraints of that demographic. So, we tried to push it as far as we could to make it more all ages and more all inclusive. And I think we did really well with that. Some of the scary stuff is legitimately kind of scary, and some of the emotional stuff is really hard to deal with in a good way. But there are certain things, like, and that we would have to send the episodes in all the time for them to review, and they would ask us to take out specific behavior. Like, there was a lot of things with we could never have characters have drinks in stemmed glassware, so like a wine kind of goblet, because to them, in their mind, that meant the characters are drinking alcohol. So that kind of stuff would have to go. There was all sorts. This is like I've been off the show for 3 years now, so you'll forgive me if my memory for specific things is faded. I've been working on 2 other shows since then, so my brain's full of all that stuff. But yeah, Hasbro would occasionally ask us to put in a thing that they were going to turn into a toy. The Power Ponies in season 4, even though the toy didn't come out for a couple years, that was a big thing for them. They wanted to do superhero versions of the ponies. And because Hasbro's paying the bills, you don't have a lot of opportunity to say, hey, we think this is a dumb idea. I think that episode turned out pretty fun. But, just as an example, if they wanted us to put in something that we didn't like, we could say, hey, we don't think this is a good idea. And they'd go like, oh, okay, well, we hear what you're saying, but we want it. Well, I don't really have the power to say we're not going to do it, because I didn't own the show. We didn't own the show. We were working for Hasbro. And if I had put my foot down, they would have just said like, okay, well, you're fired, and we'll get someone else to do it. So it never came to that. They were always very reasonable. Like, some of the things they wanted to put in, there was a helicopter they wanted in one episode, and you're like, the ponies don't even have like cars with engines and stuff. Everything's magic based, and they're like, well, it's got to go in somewhere. And like, how long do you need it on screen for? And they didn't really care. So there's a scene, I don't even remember what episode it's in. I'm sure someone in the chat probably does. The scene of it just flies across the screen in the background for maybe 3 seconds. And that was sufficient for them. Another thing was they wanted to make the Swan Boat toy when Pinkie Pie went to Manhattan with their sister. Well, they said we had to put in a swan boat somewhere in that season, and we're just like, oh, we can do sort of a Central Park kind of park. We can have a sort of canal. We can put the swan boat there, so it makes sense in the story. And again, it's on screen very, very short amount of time, but it ticked that box for them. So sometimes it was a fun challenge to be like, okay, how do we take this idea of this product that they want to include? How do we make it fit in the story that feels natural, that feels organic? Sometimes we did a really great job. I'm sure you talk to some fans, there's certain things we probably did not do a very good job. And sometimes it's super hard. They'll ask for a thing and be like, this makes no sense, but we'll do our best. So,
Heck yeah. I'm curious though, is there anything or what rather is like the something that you wanted to get into the show, but because of the censors or maybe just not being able to fit it in, you weren't able to?
well, one thing that springs to mind is that at the end of season 4, when Twilight was fighting Kirek for the first time, there was a lot more violence in terms of the fighting. I think she kicked him in the face a couple times, and it was boarded really cool. And it was just a fun sequence. It's always fun to sort of drop the leash and see how far you can push stuff. And we got quite a bit in, but there was still more we could have done. But again, it's a show marketed and aimed at younger kids, so they have to be mindful. And one of the things we had to change was um, whenever Sombra would steal people's magic and they would sort of collapse on the ground, they couldn't be still because it would look like they were dead, according to them. So we were the compromise we came to was that they would twitch, like they were still moving, but in some ways that was worse because it would look like they had some sort of massive neurological trauma or something. So taking those comments and finding this happy medium for them that would tick the box for what they were concerned the issue was, and then maybe we would try and find a way to make it a joke or something even more subversive. That was really fun too. So it's how you approach it, right? It can be really frustrating and you want to punch a hole in the wall, or you can just embrace it and be like, how do we make this, how do we use this to our advantage?
Heck yeah. Sometimes it's frustrating. You want to punch Tyrek in the face. I mean, that's how it goes.
Absolutely.
So you keep mentioning this whole targeted to a younger demographic sort of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I've got to ask, when here in the future, whenever we see our Gen 6 reboot for adult only
Mm-hmm.
audiences, uh, what if they bring you on as director? What is that going to look like? What's in store for us?
I mean, I'm not a big fan of like having sex and stuff in those kinds of shows, but I just think having no real concerns about language, and that doesn't necessarily mean having them curse, or topics like, instead of having to do allegorical stories about death, maybe we could actually do a story about death and just get into some of those heavier topics. I It's a tricky thing in my line of work. We work on a lot of kids shows, and in my opinion, and this is my opinion alone, I feel like a lot of networks undervalue the intelligence of the kids who are watching the shows, and I think that they are sensitive, maybe overly so, to some of the content that the kids watch or could potentially watch. I think back to some of the movies I watched when I was a kid, and they were kind of scary and unsettling. And it's, in my mind, it's okay for something to be a little scary as long as everything works out by the end of the story. I think that's a good thing to show kids, is that not the world isn't all covered in foam padding and nothing's ever going to hurt you. Like I feel like in some ways that maybe does a disservice to the viewers. We got to give kids a little bit more credit. But the network, the Hasbro, the people who own the property, they have whole different set of rules they need to abide by, and they need to keep the people buying the toys happy. They don't want those letter writing campaigns that say that the show isn't fit for the people it's aimed at, or they don't want that controversy. So I get it.
Fair enough. I envision like a reboot of drinking and late poker games and smoking cigars or something of the such. Uh, just having the creative
Sure.
freedom to be able to explore those things with a all inclusive audience.
Yeah, like no handcuffs is great. Uh, but in some ways, having some handcuffs forces you to be a bit more creative about how you get around those rules. So it can be a double-edged sword for sure. Like sometimes the restrictions are a fun way to see like what can we slip past them, what can we get in there, or how do we say the same thing in a smarter way, but it still is okay to go on TV for 6-year-olds.
Fair enough. I'm reminded of the scene with Pinkie Pie on the express with the pipe with the bubbles coming out of it. Certainly
Exactly.
a lot of ways that can be explored.
Mm-hmm.
Talking a little bit about the later seasons, because that's there's a sense of nostalgia in the community at the moment. I think I might have mentioned that to you before. There's a lot of
Yes.
people who are coming into the fandom that are brand new, that are reigniting a lot of the old passions of the people who have been a part of it for all this time. And there's this
Mm-hmm.
uh, surge of people going and exploring older content, whether that be fan made or official. So um, some of the things that I'd like to bring up on that end, starting with Cozy Glow. Feel free to explore any way you'd like to. But so with Cozy Glow in particular, we had seen for the first time, have seen so many different redemption arcs of people coming in, being a villain, getting confronted, getting shut down, and then maybe not immediately, but at some point giving a chance to be able to come back and um, repent for their sins, if you will. So
Mm-hmm.
Cozy was one of the few who did not get that opportunity despite being a child. Um, and that's like one of the craziest things about being a part of the show for the last 12 years. Like if I could point a finger at it, I'd say like that's one of the most bananas things about it. Do you have any feelings or comments on that?
Yeah, I mean I understand where people are like, you sent a kid to hell. But that sort of goes to what I was saying earlier that, uh, I think having real world repercussions to, I mean, not everyone gets sent to hell, but like having the weight of what that character done translate into actual consequences. We just talked a lot about like we've done a lot of these redemption arcs. We've done a lot of things where characters can do really horrible stuff, and then all of a sudden they're their best pals now, and that it was starting to feel like, oh, at the end of the season, this is the kind of thing that's going to happen. We're going to have a big bad guy. They're going to save the day through friendship, and they're going to convert the bad guy so they see the error of their ways, and everything's okay. So maybe it wasn't the best idea, but we sort of felt like, what if we do something a little unexpected, something different? I know Nicole Dubuque, who essentially created the concept of Cozy Glow, has said like we don't even know if he actually is a kid. There's that weird horror movie from like 10 years ago, Orphan, about it's maybe not for kids at all, but it's about a girl who's adopted into a family and all sorts of crazy stuff happens. And it turns out she's not a kid. She's just like an adult with a weird uh, condition that keeps her looking like a kid. So is Cozy Glow actually a child? We never got the opportunity to explore that. Maybe we could have come up with a good story so it felt less creepy. But I can certainly appreciate why some people thought it was maybe too far for the show.
Okay, maybe not too far, just crazy. At least for me, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, to hell
Also, we
for the
were in
kid.
we were we were in like the later seasons. I think we were just like every season we never knew if we were going to get another one, except maybe like middle of season 7. So there's a lot of like, well, this may be the last time I get to do something crazy on this show. Let's see where the line is. And then you do it and you're like, okay, well now if I need to walk that back, how do we walk that back? And it's tricky. Like if we'd had a season 10, I'm sure we probably could have had a lot of fun figuring out like, do we want to bring the bad guys out of stone again? Obviously we probably wouldn't have done that particular ending in season 9 if we knew we were getting a season 10. But like that, I read a lot of comic books, and I like that idea of you feel like you wrap up a story in one issue, and then 50 issues later they find a way to bring back some guy that was the bad guy that you thought was dead or defeated, and it's a fun, creative challenge. And yeah, sometimes when it works great, it's awesome, and sometimes it doesn't work well at all. But it's still, that's part of why we got into telling stories and working in animation in the first place.
Okay. Why do you think we didn't get a season 10 to explore those other avenues, or a season 20 for that matter?
Honestly, I think it was a Hasbro decision. They felt that the show had gone on a lot longer than they had expected. I think, according from these are things I have heard. I have no information to back this up, so this is just my thoughts. Is that they had seen some metrics that showed the show was trending downward in terms of sales, in terms of uh, people tuning in to watching episodes on Discovery. So the ratings were down a little bit. I think they also were pretty eager to take the property back. They had partnered with Wild Brain to work on this show, and I think they wanted a little bit more hands-on control. They had recently bought a studio, Boulder, in Ireland. I think they were really all through season 9. They were trying to figure out ways to potentially take season 9 away from Wild Brain people and have Boulder do it earlier, just because they want it. It's their show; they can do what they want with it. And I think they just really wanted to be more invested in the day-to-day operations of the show. And relaunching, it's like same with comic books. You put out a new issue of Spider-Man, new story arc. If you put out issue 792, you may not get as many people picking it up as if you write issue 1 on the cover. You can build more hype around a brand new version than something that's in its 11th, 12th, 13th season. They also were feeling like the barrier to entry for new fans coming in now was really high, because you had to know all this lore of the previous seasons. You couldn't just jump in with any old episode and know what's going on. There would always be a reference back to something else, or it was setting up some overarching thing for the whole season. So there's a number of reasons why.
Okay. Before we get too far into the questions here, before we hop over to Q&A as well, I'd like to ask,
Hmm.
um, as a makeup for my initial question here, do you have a favorite character in the show?
Uh, of the main 6, Applejack was always kind of my favorite because she was sassy and understated, and I really liked that. I also feel like she never got the same level of love. Like I think in some ways that made her a hard character to write really interesting stories with, because she was so practical. She was so unaffected by certain things that you know that's why you see a lot of episodes where she's like freaking out. I think it was like trying to figure out what her flaw is in order to give her a compelling story, and that was really tricky. And I don't know that we ever really did her a full solid, especially in some of the later seasons. But she was one of my favorites. I think we were just always wanted to try and get there more with her. I really like Discord a lot because we could get away with all sorts of fun, weird visual stuff too. That was a lot of fun.
Okay. Yeah, Discord, of course, of course. Maybe he's a potential candidate for Gen 5, I'd say. He's, in the canon, he's immortal. So, I mean, who
Mm-hmm.
knows? What was that other character you mentioned? The first one there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, you're
Applejack,
not even
you
gonna let me do
know.
the bit? I think
No, no. I hate that bit. So mean.
I love Applejack. I love her. She's great. She's a silly pony.
Yeah.
Um, wouldn't even let me get off the bit. How dare you? Uh, your experience, my good sir. Um, The shows came a long way. The Student Six, I think, was probably one of the most shocking things for me, and just the fact that the whole school of friendship, like that really caught me off guard. It was quite a change in pace for the show.
Yeah,
Certainly
I
a
mean
shift
that's
to
another
focus.
thing where Hasbro wanted to explore. They wanted to school. They said they want a school. So how do we take that idea and run with it? I think the Student Six were really interesting. I wish we'd had more time to explore them. It could have been an interesting way to kind of, one of the things we talked about early on was depending on how it went with them, we could maybe bring them a little bit more to the front and focus, and have the main six girls be more like mentors to them, so that they didn't. So the stories were more about the student six. But again, that's a tricky balance because that's not what people watch the show for. Um, but I definitely think that it would have been cool to have at least one more season, so we could have gotten into them even more.
Yeah, there's some awesome characters. I know that there's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of people that are coming in these days, in the newer days of Pony, or the more recent days, and they have uh, a big affinity for those characters like Yona or
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And I think, we got to bring in a lot of newer voice actors for that, and it breathed a little bit of life into the show in its later seasons. It offered some new storytelling opportunities. Yeah, some of them felt a little bit like we've been there and done that with other characters, which I understand, but um, I think the episodes with them that worked really well, and it's hard to introduce new characters in that late in a series run and have the audience give a damn about them. And I think we came pretty close, so I'm proud of that too.
yeah, definitely so. Um, I love seeing the new voice actors and actresses. They were incredible. I'm a little
Mm-hmm.
biased towards a few of the characters because I do love quite a few of them. Even after all of these years invested in the others, I was still able to find a lot of these new ideas really compelling. Um,
Yeah, and that's another thing that I'm really proud of is that we all made a lot of an effort to. I'm sorry, my dog's barking. To try and bring in new voice talent and different voice talent all the time. Like, when you look at the IMDb listing for character voices, it's incredibly long. I think we'd had someone told, I don't remember the exact number, it might be like over 200 distinct character voice actors over the run of the show. Like, that's awesome. And we helped open the door for a lot of new actors who've gone on to do more stuff, and that's really rewarding too, giving people the opportunity to show what they have.
no joke. Um, and I hope we see more of them in the future as
I
well.
hope so. Yeah.
How do you feel about the ponies with the hands and the legs and the I forgot what they're called, Equestria Girls?
Well, that's another one where Hasbro was like, we're going to do this. They wanted to have fashion dolls. They wanted to compete with Barbie, and that's why that show exists. And they came to the studio and they had binders full of Anthro ponies, the fan art that they found, like even before we had started the first movie. And
Terrifying.
yeah, like people, they said, look, there's clearly a demand for this kind of thing. We think it's a good idea. So now it was our job to set that up for them. And I think the first movie's good, but I think that it got much better on the second and third, and when it became its own show. And my partner was the director on one of the directors on that show, Katrina. So that's how we met. I'm really thankful for that. And I think that in a lot of ways, what she and Ishii did on that show is very unique and very different from our show, but still tied um, in such a cool way. Yeah, and I think once they brought her on, it really became its own thing. Not to blow up her spot too much, but I think in a lot of ways she's the. We joke a lot around work that she's the person who cracked Sunset, because Sunset is kind of her in terms of like the acting and the attitude and stuff. I mean, obviously the voice actors bring a lot to the table, but in terms of like how she was portrayed in the animation and the storyboarding and stuff, a lot of that is from Katrina. And yeah, I think it's cool. It's cool that to me that it went as long as it did. That there was space for a weird spin-off that no one thought would work, and that there's clearly fans who prefer one over the other. Like that's crazy and awesome at the same time. I wish it had gotten a proper ending the way that our show did. It deserved it. But it was also a weird thing where Hasbro used it as an experimenting ground for like, oh, we're gonna put these things on YouTube, or we're gonna do like unboxing videos with them. And I know that was a little frustrating to the Equestria Girls crew because they really enjoyed the storytelling stuff and the things they set up in the movies, and then when they got into the shorts, it was a little less rewarding because it was chopped up and they really couldn't sink their teeth into it in quite the same way.
Heck yeah. Before we move to Q&A here really quick, I'd like to ask just as a kind of a tie-up to my arc here, the Generation 5, of course, is a brand new thing for the community. It took us by surprise, sort of, and it's been quite a ride since. And it seems like Hasbro is really pulling out the stops. We have a game that just came out. We have the series. We have the special that came out for the series. We have the movie. We have all of these different things. Specifically speaking to the movie, and Boulder Media. Boulder Media, I know, made the movie. Did they have any hand in Friendship is Magic as well? Because I had seen that they were credited on some things, and I was curious if they were outsourced for something or what role they might have played.
I think they did one or two of the Equestria Girls shorts as sort of like a test thing, and then they did the Rainbow Road Trip special. That was all. We weren't involved at all. It was a sort of taken from us, and they're like, "We're going to do this with Boulder." And it's like, okay. So we never really had communication with them. They never reached out to any of us on the show. That we were sort of separate productions. So everything I know about it is kind of hearsay. So
okay. Did you ever watch Rainbow Road Trip?
No, I couldn't bring myself to do it just because we were knee deep in season 9 stuff when it came out, and I'm sure it's great. I know a lot of people worked really hard on it. It was a bit tough to be like, oh, they're doing a thing that potentially could affect what we're doing, but we don't really get a say in it. Like, it was nice that Nicole Dubuque, who wrote it, was involved. She was one of our story editors, so she knew and could make sure continuity wise everything all lined up. But yeah, it's a bit weird just having this thing exist that we weren't involved in, and I honestly don't have an opinion about it one way or the other.
Okay. As far as G5 goes, we have the movie that Boulder had done as well, and it's actually been received very, very well by the fandom. Everything from
That's
music
great.
to the characters to the identity that the theme that they're trying to put off has been really appealing to a lot of people, and actually fairly reminiscent of Friendship is Magic. Would you consider giving that a chance at some point?
Maybe. I mean, you got to remember, I did almost a decade on all things pony, so
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, but I did it every day for hours and hours and hours. So I don't know. I don't know that I want to get back into it right now. It can be tricky watching a thing that you're not a part of and sort of feeling like, oh, I would have done that differently. That's not fair to the people who worked on it. It's not fair to the show and what it is, because I'm not on it. So I don't know. I think that's the answer right now is maybe I'll look at it. I'm not in a hurry to, though.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, just curious. We have a lot of love for it, and
that's great. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that the time is right for new people to come in and tell their stories for My Little Pony. And, I think there's still a lot that can be done with the brand. And I hope the show is as awesome as, or even better than G4, because its success will ensure more content, more pony stuff to come, whether it's a G7, 8, 9, or more of, maybe revive interest in more G4 stuff. I don't know. Like, it's good for the brand across the platforms.
Heck yeah, certainly. It's certainly good for our community as well.
Yeah.
Sustainability, keeping interest there.
And there's a lot of people who worked on G4 who are working on G5. Like, and it's weird that, so G4 was done at Wild Brain, and a big chunk of G5 is being done at Atomic Cartoons in Vancouver, which is literally like 3 blocks away from Wild Brain. There's people who boarded on G4 who were boarding on G5. Jillian Barrow wrote stuff on G4. She's I think she's like the story editor on G5. So like there is some crossover, whether intentional or not, and so I think you're going to get these people coming into G5 and spreading that love of the show and the characters to new people. They're sort of like seeds into the new generation, and hopefully they can, maybe it's a bad word to use considering we're still in a pandemic, infect people into loving the ponies and the world as much as the people who worked on G4 did. I don't know. That's my hope.
Fingers crossed. I mean, we certainly hope for the best. Um, as a final question here before we move into Q&A, is there, as we've talked a couple times about it, the pony fandom is quite diverse. There's a lot going on with it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in particular that you have a distinct admiration for as far as the pony fandom goes, whether it be charity, community? Um, is there any one thing that you think is really defining of the culture that is cool to you?
The the thing that always struck me as amazing and wonderful was the inclusiveness of the community and the amount of LGBTQIA2S plus people who would come to the conventions and feel safe, heard, seen, valued. That was astounding and so important to me. We had a lot of people from that community who worked on the show, who cared about the show, and to have the opportunity to see how much that work impacted other members of their community was important and amazing to see. And it was nice to see that, we keep hearing all these horrible things about the world and about all the hate and stuff that goes on, and it's just so depressing. And knowing that there was this space where people could go and just be themselves and share the love they had for the show, inspiring them to create art, to make friends, to come out of their shells, to change their lives for the better. Like, that's nuts, and it's overwhelming, and it's humbling, and it's something that you don't really think about when you're making these shows. Like, it just feels like, I just make some crap for TV, but that's not how I feel, but that's how your brain can kind of go and feel like this isn't important. What I do isn't important. It's entertainment. It's ephemeral. You watch it, you're done, you move on with your life. You're not changing minds. You're not affecting people's lives. But then you go to these conventions, and yeah, you are. What you do has incredible value. It's very important to people, and I don't know. I don't even know if I have the words to explain how amazing that was to me and how much I still value that.
Certainly. Yeah, I know that, especially these days, if somebody feels a certain way or wants to express themselves in a certain way, they have places they can go on the internet and communities they can get in touch with. And thinking back to when I was a kid and I was familiar with these cultures and learning about them, I felt like Pony was definitely one of the I'd almost say one of the few places that was really had a foothold on the internet where people could come and express themselves in a way that they weren't going to be isolated or attacked for doing so. Um,
Mm-hmm.
really, before that became something that you saw a little bit more on the main stage of social media. So yeah, it's that's very wonderful.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind here, I might switch over to a few questions from the audience. I know we probably have
Absolutely.
4
Happy to
or 5
answer
of
them as
them.
best I can.
Probably at least 4 or 5 of them at this point.
Sure. I got nowhere to be.
Oh, don't say that. We'll keep you here all night. Let me see here. Oh, that's a good one. And I'm sure you have gotten this before, but there's some questions about any backlash you personally might have received or heard about people receiving, rather, that you worked with about the Apple Dash shipping. Did you make any enemies with that one, or any of the shippers for that
Oh,
matter?
sure. The thing is, no matter what you create, there's gonna be people who love a decision and people who hate a decision. You know, I personally didn't really want to confirm any relationships in that last episode, but I was outvoted by people who are well above my pay grade. So they thought it would be a nice way to wrap things up in a bow. That's fine. I brought up the point that by saying these two characters are in a relationship, you're invalidating of all the people who think that they should be with other characters or whatever. But sometimes they just have to make a decision and say this is what we're going to do, and you have to abide by that. But yeah, when season 9 ended, I got death threats and stuff too, for sure. Not just because of that, but because a lot of stuff in the show.
Oh, that's unacceptable. I'm sorry to hear that. That's
People,
quite a
in
bit.
some ways, I mean, you made it, right? When someone says you should die. But now that I have some distance from it, it was kind of scary at the time because I got a lot of stuff through like my personal portfolio website, which is sort of like, that's not the place for this. But that speaks to how important the show was to people and how much it meant to them that they felt so strongly about these particular things. So in a weird way, I kind of have to respect it. I don't know that how they went about it is maybe the most constructive because I'm just one guy, man. Like, I'm a human being. I have feelings. They don't know why things are the way they are, and sometimes I'm right with them on certain things that they're frustrated with, but I couldn't talk about it because of my NDA, or I don't want to throw anyone under the bus specifically. Like, I don't know. It's tricky.
Certainly. And I mean, in some cases, I guess if things were to be done at all, that I think that they were done in a tasteful way. Like
Yeah,
Apple
we
Dash.
tried to keep it in a way that sort of like, it could be a little bit ambiguous. It's not as ambiguous as maybe I would like it to be, but you do what you can.
If I may clarify, you said you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but just to be vague about it, when the higher ups said, "Hey, we want this to happen," were they like, these characters specifically need to be together? Were they directed
Mm-hmm.
with this? Oh, really? Okay, I wasn't sure if they were like, people need to be with people, and that was just, or ponies need to be with ponies, or whatever.
Yeah, like they wanted to hint that Fluttershy and Discord were together and that
Monsters.
yeah. Well, hey man, it was the end of the show. So why not make a couple really bold Hail Marys? I can understand where their heads were at and why they were like, let's just do it. Let's just go for it. And some of them weren't as in tune with the fandom base as others, and that's okay because they were coming at it from a very different place. So I don't know. It's I can understand why some people really don't like it, and I can understand why some people really do. And there's no right or wrong answer. Everyone's opinion is valid.
Absolutely. I think especially with the fandom drama, when it comes to things like that, whether it be Twilight Gets Wings or Equestria Girls or anything, when all the dust settles, for the most part, people who had extreme opinions on the subject tend to find that they enjoy where things have led, or at least just
Yeah, and
agree
I
with them.
think
So
the
I respect
reason I
that.
think that one becomes kind of a sticking point is because like when Twilight got wings, we were able to tell subsequent stories after that, sort of explaining why that was kind of integral, important for character growth, etc., for better or worse. we didn't get to do that with these ones. It's just like, hey, this thing happened, see ya. So I think that's why there's a bit of like, what the hell? Like this isn't what I want. Um, but I think that's ending those things on a cliffhanger, especially when we knew there was going to be another season, or hoping there was going to be another season. It gave us an opportunity to justify through the storytelling why these decisions were good ones. Like I remember when at the end of season 5 when we redeemed Starlight, that our job for the next season was to show like why folding her in with the friends was a good idea, why that was important, what that meant to her as a character, and could we write stories where it showed that her redemption was worthwhile. That's not for me to say whether or not we did a good job, but I think that it offered new opportunities for storytelling.
Heck yeah! I mean, I'd say you did a good job. I personally am on the same boat with that as well. I know that I don't think there's been a character before or after Starlight that it came on later in the series that, I mean, Glim Glam kind of like became a fan favorite, especially when she redeemed and she started showing, what she was capable of, or you guys were able to deliver that to us. It was wonderful. I
Yeah,
love
and
her to death.
it was cool for us. Like once we put her with Trixie, and there's this weird magic of those two together, and it was really fun to do stuff with them because they could be things that the main 6 girls couldn't be. They could be kind of jerks. They could be kind of snarky, and kind of oblivious, and we could get to some of those same friendship lessons in a different way, in a new and fresh way. And I don't know, there was just something about the two of them together that really clicked, and it was a lot of fun for us, and I hope it was fun for the viewers, because I think Kelly and of course the name has gone out of my head now. The voice actor for Trixie did such an amazing job in the performances that I think it just rounded them out in such an amazing way.
Yeah, no, you're not joking at all. Every bit of it had the same magic that Ponies had the entire time of just being great, from the writing to the characters to the voice acting. I mean, all of it, and it was wonderful. Glim Glam, as I said, fan favorite to date. She still
Yeah,
holds a very special place in a lot of people's hearts.
that's awesome.
I have a question being bumped from the very, very top. Our editor in chief, Mr. Sethisto himself, really wants to
Mm-hmm.
know where were the bats? Where were all the bats?
I specifically asked them never to be in the show because Seth wanted them so much, and I like to deny him things.
Okay, that's good. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Mm. I feel. What about at the very end? I think we got like maybe Autumn Blaze or something in like that last shot in the last song. One of the Kirans. No bats, like not at all. Nowhere. None. Anywhere. At
And the
all.
number of characters we had to put in some of those shots, like Mike Vogel, who wrote the that episode, wanted even more characters, and Flash just couldn't handle it. Like from a technical standpoint, we already had to split some of those scenes into multiple versions of themselves, and then in After Effects composite them all together. Like they were just so beyond what the program could do. It was like feature level amounts of characters, and we're a TV show on a TV show schedule and budget, so some of them just got the axe because it was like we can't put them all in. It's a practical thing. It's not a satisfying answer, but
No, absolutely. That's completely understandable. I Seth is the one I have make the thumbnails for these because he's good at that. He has an eye for doing this for so long, and I have a feeling that whatever you had said right there is probably gonna be you're probably gonna. I'm sorry for
oh
whatever
no,
he does in response to that.
I'm gonna regret this, aren't I? Yeah,
Likely, you're
more
talking to a
hate mail.
website that is like we are known for our Trixie, Bad, and Kieran propaganda, and
I
um,
understand. It's well deserved, and I think even if we had done the bats, you probably would have been disappointed with what we had done with them. Not that we were planning on doing anything bad. I just think that the hype for them was so high that whatever we had done just wouldn't have lived up to it.
It's likely. I mean, bats were a part of the brony culture, especially. It was one of those things we pulled from the background, like,
Mm-hmm.
although it was
One of
hardly a
many.
specific character. Right, but like, I mean, a lot of them you could point a finger at and say like a specific character for a lot of these, but the
Mm-hmm.
idea of bats as a whole really took hold. Um, what was the most challenging thing creatively for you in Friendship is Magic?
Um, as the show went on, just the the volume of content that we were making at the same time. So normally on a show, you sort of have a slow ramp into a season. You're very busy with production in the middle, and then as episodes get finished, your workload kind of lightens off a little bit, and you have a little bit more time to breathe and make sure things are looking great. But as we got into season 6, 7, 8, 9, they were just stacking seasons on top of each other. So we'd be in the middle of production of season 6, starting season 7, or well, better, we'd be in the middle of season 7, finishing season 6, and starting season 8 all at the same time. So it was just a lot of juggling in the air because we're trying to keep. We had specific air dates that, although Hasbro never told us exactly what they were, we knew they would be roughly. They had to be into them by these dates, and they would air them whenever they decided to air them. But just trying to keep the train of content going and not having breaks, not taking any kinds of vacations or whatever to recharge. That was really, really tough. Just trying to push through burnout was a difficult thing. Yeah. I remember we were doing an edit for the 100th episode, just to, and this is, don't do what I did, but that morning I woke up and had to go to the emergency room because I had kidney stones. But instead of taking the day off, I went in and did the edit session for the 100th episode after being in the emergency room all morning. Not smart. Um, don't do that. Look after yourself. As cartoons are great, but they shouldn't be at the expense of your own health.
Fair enough. I actually have a question on that, if you don't mind, the 100th
Mm-hmm.
episode, not on the kidney stones, although I do feel bad for that and hope that went well for you.
Oh,
Um,
everything's fine.
Good to hear. Good to hear. The 100th episode, of course, is a fan favorite for obvious reasons. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that's anything new to anybody. Um, the scene in the freeze frame after they're launched into the air and we have y'all standing there in your horse masks.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Is that's just a spur of the
We were just
moment thing,
messing
or
around. We were messing around in the edit. And we said, what if we did this weird thing? Put it in for one frame. We ran it by Hasbro. They said, sure. It was sort of a celebration of everything the show had accomplished up at that point. And we thought, why not? We got these dumb horse masks. Let's do it and see what happens. See how long it takes for someone to find it, thinking that, oh, maybe they'll find it after a week. And it was like literally as soon as the episode had ended, or maybe even before the episode had ended, someone had
yeah,
found it. So I don't know. We were just having fun. We get to make cartoons for a living. It should still be fun, right? We were having
yeah.
a good time and trying different things.
That was a super fun bit. I love that. It kind of gives me like old like SpongeBob nostalgia. I can't think of another
Mm-hmm.
cartoon in my personal childhood that has
Oh, they
anything
did
like
it
that.
in.
But
They did weird stuff like cut to live action bits and old Looney Tunes cartoons in the '40s and stuff. So
oh,
like
I didn't know
it's
that.
a. Oh yeah. Um, I don't know. We're all big dorks and we like having fun. So we came up with an idea and ran with it. No one said no, so it's in the show.
Good. That's good. Did you ever hear anything about that after the fact, like from Hasbro or from anybody else?
No, we cleared it with them. We told them when they were reviewing it that we put this in there for a frame or 2 frames or whatever it was, just so you know. And if you want it out, we'll take it out. And they never said to take it out. So I think they were really on board with a lot of the weirdness of the 100th episode.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, because that was just
Yeah,
wow. You can't keep up with the references in that episode.
it's a strange episode, and I like how weird it is. It was an opportunity to do some really different stuff. So it was a fun challenge.
Heck yeah. Do you still have that somewhere, like Batman, like hung up in your closet, that horse mask?
No, because they were so cheap that they just dissolved. Like they got dry and brittle, so you would pick them up and they would just collapse into bits and dust. So
Ooh.
yeah, probably not the highest grade of plastic.
Oh, dear Lord. And I realized I hadn't been so far, but in the future here, I'm going to be reading off the names of the people who asked the questions. I feel like that might
Oh,
be
okay.
appropriate.
I think that's fair. That's good. Good to give them a shout out.
Um, Let me see here. Before I do a question that was submitted privately earlier, what are your thoughts on the whole, big demon monster blows up Twilight's library, national brony landmark, and then it's replaced with a giant middle finger, um, a literal giant middle finger. Was that intentional? I feel like that
The
was just a
treehouse or the her castle.
her castle that is
Yeah,
coincidentally shaped like a middle finger.
Hasbro had designed a castle, and they said we need a castle. So we were trying to figure out a way to again make it feel earned. So wasn't just a thing where you start the next season and you're like, hey, she lives in a castle now, and we got the design from Hasbro. They're like, this is what the toy is going to be, so make it work. So again, because it's a show aimed at younger kids, we couldn't kill anybody in the show, so we thought, well, I like the library, but we could blow it up and have it be that emotional equivalent of losing a character. Because we knew going in, if we were going into season 5 and she had this castle, how do you justify storytelling wise why she lives in a castle when she used to live in this treehouse with a library, but now we're not going there ever? Like it was just, it's one of those things that sometimes Hasbro throw you a curveball, and it's like, well, you would ask like, well, how does this affect all these other things in terms of the storytelling? And they'd be like, we're making a toy, figure it out. So that's why.
Okay. Did you did you hear from the fans? Did you ever realize that it was shaped like a middle finger? Have you heard that
Of
before?
course. Oh yeah. When we saw it the first time, we were like, okay.
Wonderful. Rip gold notes. Let us see here. I have a question from Iron Yoshi over on the blog. Uh, they had asked, why did it take so long for Celestia to start getting more roles in the episodes?
I think it wasn't a deliberate choice. It's just there were so many characters on the show. We were spoiled for choice. And I think also it's kind of the Superman problem, and we kind of got into it a little bit with Twilight towards the end, is the character is so powerful and all-knowing and good at everything. How do you tell a story where they don't just fix the conflict or resolve the problem in the first 5 minutes and then you have no more story? I'm not saying it can't be done, and maybe we should have tried harder for more of that, but it was a very difficult challenge and a thing to crack with the schedule we had for breaking stories. So I think it was when we came up with an idea when we were just pitching story concepts, if one landed, that's the one that we went with. We didn't have time to sort of go like, hey, we don't have enough stories with this character outside of maybe the main 6. We always tried to make sure that was pretty balanced. But you know, uh, you'd have new characters you had to introduce for the season, and you have your main characters, and then you have your sort of seasonal arc episodes. It didn't leave a lot of room for solo episodes with her. I would have loved to do more. I mean, I think giving Nicole Oliver the opportunities to sort of break out of that regal thing, like the sisters trip, and having them goof around and be funny. Like she's so funny just as a person. Giving her the opportunities to do much more acting wise was always great. I would have loved to have the opportunity to do more of that.
Okay, heck yeah. Another user here, it looks like one of our moderation staff actually, um, Comrade Sparkle had asked regarding the casting of William Shatner as Grandpere. How did this come about, and what was the influence of his acting on the character?
Well, he had been tweeting about bronies. I can't remember specifically, but I know when we were talking about casting that episode, we'd had the good fortune of having some other guest stars on the show before that. We had Weird Al, we had Patton Oswalt, and I think knowing that we had some specific parts that were going to be sort of like a one-off and could be kind of tempting to a guest star, Hasbro was keen on trying to get a guest star, and I think we jokingly just said, like, why doesn't someone ask William Shatner if he'll do it, thinking there's no way in hell he's going to come and do a voice on the show. And then they approached him. I wasn't part of those conversations, and somehow he said yes. So we're like, oh, okay, I guess this is happening. So when we were designing the character, especially the younger version of the character, there's some nods to Shatner in there. Like, he's kind of a gold-colored pony, like the command uniform on TOS, Star Trek. He's got Star Trek sideburns. He's got the William Shatner spit curl thing. And then when we went down to LA to record him, I was kind of expecting him to do the sort of standard, halting Shatner way of talking. And he gave this kind of really interesting, subdued performance. And the more I was listening to it in the room, it was like, wow, this is not what I had envisioned for this character when we knew he was going to do it, but I almost like that it's not what we expected. It wasn't just a Shatner caricature done by Shatner. It was this really kind of softer, you could really feel the anger and hurt under the character without it being big and bombastic. And I think it really did color how we set up all the acting and stuff for the performance of the Grandpere in that episode.
Okay, and as I mentioned before, Grandpere is of course one of the better episodes of the show. It's definitely a really unique and really interesting story. Um,
Yeah.
sad story for sure.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a sad story. I think it works because there's a lot of not sad stories around it too. Like, it felt like, oh, we can go here now, and it doesn't change the overall tone of the show. It felt like we had earned the opportunity to tell that kind of story, knowing that we're not going to make 26 episodes in the season that are all heavy and sad, and people won't want to watch the show anymore.
certainly, somebody has a question about fan interaction here. So, um, earlier in the Brony community, we had the animator Jane Animations who did the Button Mash Adventures, as well as a few others, and he was one of the few examples of, especially in the earlier days of Hasbro, kind of reaching in and kind of halting some of those things for in some cases, I mean, agreeable and obvious reasons. How do you think that the relationship between Hasbro and the community, from a legal standpoint, changed over the course of the show's production, and do you think that changed at all?
I don't know. I've never really had the opportunity to talk to anyone from legal at Hasbro about how they approached that stuff. I mean, I can understand that from their standpoint, it's their property. They want to control it. They want to make sure that it's whatever's being put out is vetted by them. And, but I do think at some point it became so massive that they couldn't reasonably keep up with everything. And I think, again, this is just my feeling, is that they probably saw the value in having people put up stuff because it just helped draw more eyes to the main show. I don't know if they sort of loosened up a little bit or had bigger fish to fry or what. So, they may have still been sending out cease and desist letters to all sorts of people and we just never heard about it. I have no idea. Thankfully, that's not something I ever really had to worry about.
Fair enough. Yeah, thankfully indeed. A message here, or a question here from Krazapan.
Mhm.
And I'll preface this with my own interaction because this is actually fairly new to me. The I was talking with Seth the other day, and he had mentioned like I don't really care for the muzzles of the later seasons. They look kind of off to me, and I was like, what are you talking about? Then when I interviewed Sean Keller, he was talking about his production of the pony models when he was building those in Flash, and how the muzzles in the later seasons looked weird. So this person has a question here about why in the later seasons it was decided to come up with new non-standard angles for the faces of the characters. Is that a thing? Because apparently it is. I didn't realize it
Yeah,
personally.
yeah. We did more specific expressions for characters. I think it just comes from again doing 8, 9 seasons of a show. You're trying to every season we were able to push things a little bit further, and build off of the library of assets we had in Flash before. And I think there was a lot of desire to broaden the world and do more different things. So part of it is just keeping everyone on the staff engaged and giving them opportunities to try new things. It's part of the natural evolution of any cartoon show. You go back and watch the very first episode of The Simpsons, and then you watch one from now, they look totally different in terms of how they're animated, their style, the voices. It probably wasn't as drastic as that, but on Pony, but it's just a part of the evolution. And the kind of stories we were trying to tell required broader things, and it was fun to try and push things farther. Maybe some cases too far, but yeah, that's why.
Okay, awesome. I didn't notice it. I didn't pick up on. I mean, I certainly saw the expressions getting different, but I hadn't realized anything beyond just more meme faces, as I called them, because you'd always wake up the next day and somebody would have redrawn one of the pictures of like the new face on one of their ponies. Um,
Yeah, it's just I think it's also a thing of like drawing. We never tried to create specific meme faces. We just wanted to draw fun expressions. That's part of the fun of doing these shows and working on these shows is selling the emotion through funny faces. And if we were able to achieve one that resonated with the fans, cool. There's lots that I thought were great that people didn't latch on to. So you can't predict what's gonna land and what's not.
Fair enough. I mean, who would have thought that the fandom would have went crazy about pudding or something of the
Mm-hmm.
such? I mean, I don't know. I
the
feel like we
the
might have.
Twyla cane. There's so many things.
There's so many
Yeah,
different things. Um, a user here named Allyster, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, said the Tree of Harmony was a unique character at the end. Was there anything you wanted to do with it before the end of the show, but weren't able to? Anything you would have liked to explore?
nothing specific comes to mind. There may have been stuff. Again, 3 years and from the end of production on the show, and then probably more like 5 from the end of sort of plotting out how we were going to wrap up the show. So my brain's a little bit fuzzy on some of the specifics. I think it was all those things. It would have been nice to delve deeper into the history. Like, did that come around? Like, how does it connect to the old school main six? Like with um, the Guardians. God damn it! I feel old because I've lost the names of them. Like Mist Main and um, all those guys. Why is it gone? Why? Um, I think there was again, because I'm a fan of comic books, if you consider the ponies were the Justice League, then the old school ponies were like the Justice Society. I think there was more to do with them and how they connected to the Tree of Harmony in a big way, and I think we could have done more with the Pony of Shadows. And um, I think that was the part of the cool thing about this show is the world was so expansive that you could have just dug down on everything that we'd already established and built up more of that, but there was still all this amazing world outside to go beyond that. uh, I think we probably could have done many more seasons of the show. Whether or not people's interest would have remained, I don't know. But yeah, I think that's part of the fun of building that world, is there was just so much we could have done, so many opportunities, and it's really heartening to see the fans having taken some of those threads and built up their fanfics and their art projects and their videos and stuff like that. That's awesome. That's having art inspire more art is a great feeling.
Heck yeah. Does becoming a princess make you an Alicorn, or does becoming an Alicorn make you a princess?
That's a great question, and I don't think we ever really nailed it down. Um, there were no specific rules for that. We kind of, like when they wanted Cadence and Shining Armor's baby, Flurry Heart, to be an Alicorn, it was a bit like, well, that doesn't really line up with what we've established, but they wanted a baby and they wanted it to be an Alicorn. So I think there's some stuff like that that kind of hiccups the arc of things. In my mind, becoming an Alicorn makes you a princess, or at least in line for royalty, because there's so few of them. But that's my personal headcanon. There could be things maybe coming up in G5. I don't know. I'm not involved, but maybe they'll contradict that. So
They've already got some strange things in the mix, so we'll see.
Well, there you go.
Let me see here. Yeah, the protagonist, the main protagonist, Sunny Star Scout is her name. Cute Earth pony. She has magic wings and a magic horn that just come out of her occasionally.
Oh, like Green Lantern style?
Green
like
Lantern style,
they're made
exactly.
from. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is. It's something.
I'm sure they'll explain it at some point.
Oh, I hope so. They might keep the pony tradition of being extremely vague about certain things.
That is fun too.
Can I? Yeah, I have a question about that. So there is like certain topics, like ponies' ages, for example. Like we never ever have anything ever even mildly referenced beyond, I think, like that classic episode of Fluttershy telling Pinkie Pie, "I'm a year older than you," or whatever.
Right.
Like that's it. Yeah. Like that and other topics similar to that. Is there any specific like reason, whether it be from a writing standpoint or whatever, that occurs?
It's better to keep them kind of nebulous, because then you don't have to get into the continuity issues of like, well, they're technically 27 now. Why would they all still be going to a birthday party? Like, they really should be thinking about getting married or whatever silly thing they do when they're older. It's that thing of like, Batman's perpetually 33. He's going to be 33 forever. At least that's the lore in DC Comics. So we sort of said that they were kind of anywhere between 16 and 21, but there was no advantage to nailing it down for us.
Aside from suddenly making a lot of bronies very uncomfortable, I think is the only thing that would have resulted from that. One of the things that I thought, like continuity wise, was really awesome, and I might be mistaken, because my mind also, even though I just rewatched all of it, I don't think Scootaloo at any point flew throughout any of it. And I remember very early on at like a Canterlot Gardens or something, maybe a panel that I had attended where Lauren had said that she very much intended for Scootaloo never to be able to fly. And
that's something that we really took that to heart. I remember Lauren saying something like that, and it's like, yeah, she is, at least in our minds, she was a positive character who had a disability, and I don't think that it was it was more interesting to tell a story about someone learning to accept their disability, to realize their disability doesn't change who they are, it doesn't limit them in any way. And I think that's a more valuable story for the show than granting her wish. And I think, it goes back to the thing of like, it's kind of a hard thing to talk about for some kids, like that I feel different from everyone else. And I think saying to those kids who have those differences, hey, if you just hope enough, maybe you'll get to have the thing that is holding you back, and that's not realistic. And I think giving them a role model for a character who goes through that process and learns to love themselves and it in all of their various ways, the things that are unique about them, is a more valuable and interesting story.
Certainly, it's not only wonderful that was kept throughout the entirety of the show, but also that I mean, you're right. Yeah, all of that. I think it's a lot more compelling to give characters weaknesses and really show them learn and gain strength through that adversity. Adversity being the key thing there. I think that's a really compelling thing that you don't see in a lot of children's.
Yeah, we all have challenges as human beings. They may not necessarily be physical or visible to people. So I think, seeing how people connected with that character too is like, oh, we're on the right path with her.
Certainly. A moderator here we have Drunk had asked, which friendship topic felt the most difficult to convey through an episode?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't know if I have a good example right now. I wish I did. Yeah, I can't. I'm sorry. My mind has gone blank on that one. I don't know that I have a good answer for that, which is again very unsatisfying. I'm sorry.
No, and I mean, I'm sure a lot of obstacles, especially between like maybe having to do things creatively to appease certain rules and regulations put forth by who you were working for, whatever the case may be. But
Yeah, it can always be difficult when the characters are fighting because it's not really something that was hard to overcome creatively, but there's that fine line of like, you want to make sure that if they're fighting, they don't become unlikable as characters, that they don't turn into jerks, or at least if they do, that they don't stay that way for forever, and that you can at least understand their point of view. They're not just mean for the sake of being mean. So sometimes when we had to pit them against each other, it would feel a little uncomfortable for a while, and trying to strike that balance of like, okay, well, they're justified in why they're annoyed right now or why they're being this way. So that trying to make sure that the characters don't break in order to convey the point of the friendship message was really hard sometimes.
fair enough. And you can, when they do break, you could do that creatively. Like Fluttershy is my favorite character, and that's like one of my favorite tropes with her is you will break her on occasion to like, and she'll be just this contrast of what she usually is to, and when it happens, it's usually a pretty powerful example, whether it be screaming at innocent animals or
Right.
turning into Hulk or turning into a bat
Yeah.
that terrorizes her friends.
But you also have to build up enough to earn that moment. You can't just do it out of the blue because you need a character to be angry. It still needs to make sense for who that character is intrinsically and how they're portrayed, not through just the story where they do break, but all stories.
Heck yeah. And I do have a question here, a good one here from Century. They had asked, and this isn't necessarily, I guess, specific to Ponies now that I'm reading it, but what is the process to hiring new writers? Later seasons had a lot of them, and I want to know if they had to watch all of the episodes to catch up. Like, what's that process for bringing somebody on?
I honestly don't know because the writing was all done out of LA and we were all up in Canada. So I only dealt with the story editors. I never really had a lot of one-on-one with individual writers. Like I would give my notes and the story editor would give their notes, and the other directors as well would give their notes. But I don't know when someone came on what the the sort of procedure was, if they were like, here's the 10 episodes you must watch in order to understand this show, or here's the copy of the Bible, or if they just came in cold and wrote a thing. I wish I knew. Some of them came in as fans of the show, I know, because I've met them at conventions. But yeah, that's where I met most of the writers initially, was at a convention. So I'm not too sure what the hiring process was like for that. And in terms of getting into the industry, again, so much of the writing is done out of LA, and I'm up in Canada, so I don't have a frame of reference for how it works. We don't have a lot of, sadly, don't have a lot of shows that are written in Canada and made in Canada at the same time.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a question that I can't quite find the source to, but I had scrolled through it a moment ago and I've lost it. And I'm going to add on a little bit to that as well to kind of expand on the point. But they had asked, in your opinion, are changelings, are they supposed to be immortal? And on that as well, I know what Lauren had said initially about the ideas of Celestia and Luna, and as Cadence was introduced and yada yada, the idea became a little bit more convoluted. What about them as well?
Yeah, again, it's not something that we ever really had to figure out. So anything that I say is just sort of my own thoughts about it. The changelings I always viewed as sort of like termites or bugs of some kind, like colonized insects. So up until Chrysalis took off, I sort of viewed the individual changelings sort of as interchangeable. They were disposable to her. So whether or not they're actually immortal, she might be, but I don't know that the individual changelings are. And then now that they have evolved into this new form, like caterpillars turning into butterflies, kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know that I really like the idea of any character being immortal. I feel like it's kind of sad.
Sure.
I think they could be really long lived, but immortality is such a hard thing for me to grasp when I start really digging into what it would mean for that character. Like,
sad for sure.
It's super sad because they would lose everyone they care about. Do they? At what point do they not have memories of an era that is maybe thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years ago? Do they exist up until the point where the universe collapses back down on itself? That kind of sucks too. So I prefer to think of the princesses as more long-lived than immortal, specifically.
Okay, curious.
But hey, man, if people like the idea of immortality and it suits them and their personal headcanons, who am I to contradict?
Well, you said it, so it's canon now.
No, that's not how it works.
In my mind, especially like with how Lauren pitched it initially, with the whole, the representations of the sun and the moon, and
Yeah.
whether or not they may exist in like a physical form, they're always like tied to those spiritually, I guess you could say.
Right. I mean, that's how it works in like Egyptian mythology and stuff.
So that's yeah. Um, I want to see Celestia come back in Gen 5 and save all the ponies, fly down from
That'd be
clouds. Cool. But it's been they refer to Generation 4 in Gen 5 as ancient Equestria, ancient history.
Mm.
So that's all we have on that so far, and there's very much this disconnect of society. So there's a lot of questions about that right now. People are curious about trying to find what they can about the lore that might confirm some of these things, because we have this attachment to the characters of Gen 4, and they're this is set in the same universe. They made it a point to be like, hey, Twilight was a thing, and this is the empire they made, and these are the influences they had, and this is how we've deviated from that since. And that's where they've left us. So everybody's kind of at this point of like trying to figure things out, wondering how things have gotten where they got to, and what's going on. So Questions like that mean a lot to a lot of people right now. They're curious.
Absolutely, and I think they're valid questions to ask, and hopefully the team on G5 has a plan for that, and will roll them out when they feel it's appropriate to answer those things.
Heck
Like
yeah.
you said, you don't want to be in the dark forever, but there is you want to feel like those seeds are earned when you get them revealed.
Certainly. And I'm glad they have that. That's like my favorite thing about all of this is that they have us asking these questions and trying to figure out what's happening next. Like that's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
that's half the fun, right?
and I don't know how much time you have here, but I'll keep asking you questions until
Oh, let's do like another 5-10 minutes. I got to get to bed at some point, but
heck yeah. Okay. Perfect. Shin Po had asked, "Do you wish the Discord could have remained an antagonist for a bit longer, or are you pleased with how his character was handled from season 3 onward?"
um, I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages to both ways, right? Like, I think he was a good antagonist, and I don't think he ever really totally stopped being an
No.
antagonist. Um, I do think that in terms of the stories that we told with him, he became more interesting, not just being kind of a bad guy, and being really much more that agent of chaos that would throw a wrench into the proceedings. And I think that was fun. I don't know. I just like him as a character. He was a lot of fun to work with and tell stories with, and come up with silly things his magic could do, because it could do whatever we needed it to do. Um, yeah, I mean, we could have done more cool stuff with him as a villain. Um, but then you also run the risk of like this guy again doing the same thing. I'll get you, ponies, and does it feel a little one note? I don't know. It's definitely a balance. And also he's so powerful too. The same thing as Celestia. Like what thing are we going to come up with now that sort of tops how they defeated him the last time in a way that feels satisfying and not like, oh, it's just the same but different. You know what I mean? Like, oh, they encased him in glass this time instead of stone. Okay, you know I mean, that's a writer's problem to figure out, but you know, I think that knowing that we were always trying to introduce new things, I'm just happy that we were able to bring them back in a fun way throughout.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, he very much did remain an antagonist for Twilight, and for the main
Yeah, it was
character as a
always
whole,
messing
Starlight.
things up.
I mean, he's the spirit of chaos, so I don't think that that's
Yeah.
too crazy for him to keep that. Um, Somebody is asking, looks like Sentry again here is asking, what was the weirdest or most interesting thing you had ever experienced at a convention?
Whoa, there's so many.
Princess Big Mac,
Uh,
maybe? That must have been something. Were you there for
I
that?
don't know. I don't know if I was there for that. I think I saw the photos of that. One of the first conventions I went to, someone proposed to someone else at our panel. That was interesting. I hope they're still together. Um, that was pretty unique. That's up there. Everything's just like a blur of imagery in my mind now, and I'm trying to remember. Like, I remember going to one of the after dark rooms at Ponyville Cider Fest, and that was unique. Not totally for me, but I can appreciate why some people dig it. Um, yeah, I don't know. You go to enough of these things, nothing really seems that weird after a while. You know, it's just like this is what it is.
Okay. No,
Kind
I
of get ready. You expect anything and everything to happen.
hopefully not everything, but yeah, no, it certainly keeps you on
Yeah,
your toes, right?
yeah.
Uh,
I don't know. It's part of the fun. It's like, okay, what things are going to happen here that I got to tell everyone back at the studio about?
yeah. Oh goodness gracious. Uh, A user Demando, it looks like, asks, Jim, it's been a long time since Equestria LA. I'm the guy who usually gave you artwork at Comic Con. What was your, and this is a little bit more of a vague question to what I just asked, what was one of your
Yeah.
favorite fandom moments while working with MLP?
Favorite fandom moments. Um, there's so many. It's hard to pick one.
I know.
I know when we were winding down, a group of bronies, I think from the Chicago area, sent us a bunch of pizzas and stuff as a thank you. That was really cool because it was something I was able to share with the whole crew. Like the conventions are great, but sometimes it was just me and some voice actors as opposed to a lot of the people, animators, sound effects engineers, people doing storyboards, designers. They all didn't get to do that the same way that I did, and I would have really loved for them to come and experience some of those things themselves and hear people say how much the show means to them, how much they value their work firsthand. Like, because it's nice that I can come back and tell them that stuff, but it's so much different experiencing it in person. And just the outpouring of generosity from fans, the amount of inspiration that the show gave people to create their own things. That's always, I don't know, it's so cool. And it's not a specific moment, but it's something that happened again and again and again. And it just was very, very rewarding.
Okay, awesome. The question I'm getting from a Aether Theorem had asked, in a royal problem, is the evil version of Celestia, Daybreaker, a part of Starlight's nightmare, since it was Celestia coming into Starlight's nightmare there, or is that a result of Celestia's intervention? Did that come from Celestia?
I think in my mind it came from Celestia. Like it was more of a fear that she had about herself of what she would be like if she had succumbed to the temptations and the darkness that had her sister had dealt with. Again, in my mind, that's how that worked.
Okay. And somebody had asked if you
You know,
still have that. Oh, sorry. Do you
oh,
have
go
a?
ahead.
Well, somebody had asked if you still have that Applejack mouse pad.
No, I gave it away at charity auction. I auctioned it off once the show was done. I think that might have been uh, Cider Fest in 2019. I might have given it out. I still have a few bankers boxes of stuff in my garage. I have every script of the show. A lot of them have notes and stuff on them. Not every version, just the locked versions of all the scripts. I have a bunch of the Funko, the nice pony models they did. I don't know what I'm going to do with all this stuff. I have all sorts of things. Someone should have it at some point for posterity. I think we'll see what happens.
Fair enough. I hope you have plenty of pony swag. It's good to have. It's required, I would say. Um, a user Cosmic Trail had asked, are mares the only ones that can turn into alicorns?
That's a good question. I don't think so, because I know at one point when they were trying to figure out what to do with the movie, Jason was telling me some of the stuff with that they had pitched an evil alicorn, a male alicorn. It never. I think he ended up evolving into the Storm King through the process of just breaking the story on that. But I know it was discussed.
Okay. Let me see here. People have been. This is something that's been asked quite a few times, and I know that a lot of information is out there about it. But I think I've gotten this now about 57 times. Um, is there any concept art that has not been seen, or that might be released still yet? Unseen concept art. People are very curious about that unseen concept art.
There's all sorts of stuff that we just have from production, but we don't own it. Like it's Hasbro's, so I have no idea what their plans are to with it. I mean, the fact that they made that first book of the art of MLP stuff, that was awesome, and it would be cool if they did more. But I would imagine that if they did, it would probably be centered on G5 stuff now, since that seems to be their priority.
Fair enough. And a question on that, on the My Little Pony movie and like the Storm King and such. I know we had like Tempest maybe in the final episode, or maybe in one of the final
Hmm.
episodes. Uh, was there ever a plan to incorporate more of the movie into the series, or any ideas you had played with about kind of tying any of that in?
It was discussed a little bit, but um, we it was really tricky in terms of like we didn't always have the budget to build those assets. Like we had Capper in the background of an episode, just standing there, and we built him so that he doesn't actually move. So it was like a single drawing, and like the model for Tempest that we used in the second to last episode was built off an existing body, and we had an artist took it upon themselves to make that in their own time to put her in there. We didn't have the time and budget to really dig into it, and also Hasbro for a while was talking like, do they want to do a sequel? So I think there was a little bit of reticence to like let us really run with those characters because they may have wanted to incorporate them into a sequel that never happened. Also, I think there was a little bit of like, well, we can't get the celebrity voice actors back to voice them because we just don't have the budget for that. So if we did use them, do we want to recast them? Are people going to be disappointed with that? There was a lot of things to think about with that. It would have been cool to fold it in a little bit more, but that's not quite how it shook out.
Fair enough. And just to wrap things up, if you'd like, I could say maybe like three more questions here before we move forward.
Sure, let's do three more.
Um, Let's see if I can find any snazzy ones here.
I think my bladder can handle three more questions.
We can make it. We can make it 2.5. I'm hearing thunder and rain in the background. Sounds like it's going crazy outside.
Exciting.
Tons of fun.
Good thing you're in the
Kansas,
basement.
Kansas. I know. Yeah, no, it's very good. Somebody had asked, was the Skull and Cozy Glows box that she pulled out during the one of the later episodes there of season 8, was that real? Did she claim that herself? There's a bit where she has I remember she has the
Yeah,
chocolate.
she empties stuff on the desk.
Yeah,
I like to think it was real.
it's creepy.
She's a bad guy. What, make it scary. Who knows what she did? Whether or not she is responsible for the death of whoever owned that skull? Don't know. I like the mystery about it.
It's terrifying to say the least.
Yeah, it's a nice, quick visual way to show that she's really not good.
What?
I'm surprised they let us get away with it. Honestly, there's every once in a while there'd be a thing where it's like, let's add this in, and standards and practices, or someone will tell us to take it out, and they didn't, so we left it in.
While I'm letting people submit a last question here, I'll ask one of those myself. So, like with Bridal Gossip, we had like one of the first episodes that really touched on race, and we hadn't really seen as much of that as like a central focus of the show until like closer to the end of Friendship is Magic. Was there any particular reason that you guys readdressed that, or what was the process for talking about those things or those topics?
There wasn't any specific reason why we didn't do it before that. I think it was just sometimes the stories come when the stories come, and they feel like they're an appropriate time to tell them, whether that was what was going on in everyone's minds at the time. It just felt like something that we wanted to talk about. And you got to be somewhat sensitive to it. I know on the show I'm on now, we're doing a lot of work with consultants to make sure that we are portraying characters of different ethnic backgrounds correctly. I know the episode in season 1 with Little Strongheart, they worked closely with some First Nations groups to make sure that story was portrayed properly. and wasn't insensitive to what the First Nations people had gone through. So sometimes there are opportunities to do it properly and get the right people involved and make sure that we're telling an effective story. That's happening a lot more now. I think sometimes in the past it didn't happen as much as it should have.
Okay. So maybe even some more of that. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a final question here from Archie before we wrap up. Was there any more plans for Spike in terms of character development or backstory? Or was he kind of just...
There wasn't specific things, but we were always wanting to push the characters a little bit further with each season. Going back to the question you asked about, like, what are their ages? It's that thing of, like, trying to find that balance between evolving the characters so that there are new obstacles for them to overcome, new opportunities to tell interesting stories, but also not make them grow up too fast. It would have been, I think, all the characters, even the background characters, we could have told so many more stories about them given the opportunity. I think the show ended when it should have, and I think it was good, knowing that going into season 9, knowing it was our last season, I think really reinvigorated the crew, and everyone put in a lot of really hard work to try and make it something special. And I think if we hadn't known that, if we had done more stuff, even though there could have been really cool stories to come out of it, there would have been there was potentially the opportunity for people to either move on or become a little less engaged with the show. Like, you don't want to overstay your welcome. So yeah, going back to the actual question, there weren't definitive plans for Spike, but if we had done more, I'm sure we would have come up with something.
Okay, a good closer for Best Pony. That's awesome. Um, before I wrap up here, I'd like to give you an opportunity if there's anything you'd like to plug or talk about, so people who might be interested in following what you've done since Pony, they can learn a little bit about that. Maybe your socials as well, if you'd like.
Sure. Well, since Pony ended in 2019, I worked on the 2-season revival of Johnny Test that was on Netflix last year. So that's all on Netflix, season 7 and 8 to look at if you're into Johnny Test. And now I'm working on a new version of Strawberry Shortcake with former MLP executive and writer Mike Vogel. He's re-envisioned the show. There's a bunch of 2D shorts that they put out on YouTube as sort of a proof of concept. Netflix was interested, so we're doing 4 holiday-themed specials that will be out late next year that will be about 44 minutes each, and they're going to be in CG. So I'm learning CG, which is a fun challenge, something new. So hopefully people will check that out when they drop. I think I don't have an official date, but it's like late 2023. We still have a lot of stuff to do on that. In terms of my socials, I'm on Twitter at The Biggest Gym. I haven't been posting a ton lately, but if people ask me questions there, I try my best to answer. Twitter can sometimes be super depressing, so I'm not on it as much as I used to be. And then I post artwork, some silly projects I've been working on of my own stuff on my Instagram, which is also at The Biggest Gym. During the pandemic in 2020, I did all these sort of silly drawings of casts of various movies that I put into a self-published book I called Rental Classics, and a bunch of people bought that, which was really cool. And I've started doing a second series of that, so if I get enough, maybe I'll do another book, Rental Classics Volume 2. Maybe I'll reprint the first one. I don't know. We'll see if people like them or not. If they don't, that's cool. Not a big deal. It's just a way for me to keep drawing, do something, keep me focused, because ongoing pandemic doesn't offer a lot of extracurricular opportunities.
Certainly not. I'm glad you could stay motivated through that, and I'm sure plenty of people will be interested when it comes out. There's some people in chat who are already excited to see the new strawberry shortcake when that drops this
Oh,
month.
awesome! That's great. Yeah, Mike Vogel's re-envisioned them, and it's pretty unique. I think people are gonna like it. Daniel Ingram's doing the music, so it's gonna have some of that good pony vibes in a different format and different stories. But yeah, I hope people dig it.
No, you just sold chat when you said Daniel Ingram. They're going crazy over it. That's awesome to hear. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight, Jim. I really appreciate you speaking with us on behalf of Equestria Daily and just me personally. It really means a lot. You've contributed so much to not only the show but the community as well through you coming and engaging with us over the years, and it means a lot that you've taken your time to do so.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure and an honor that people still want to hear about this show 3 years since we wrapped up, and I'm very touched that you reached out to me. And thank you, everyone, for your excellent questions. I hope I answered them all to your satisfaction.
Heck yeah. Before I give the final closer, any famous last words, as we've been calling them? Any famous last things you'd like to say? Any last digs at
Oh
Seth
man,
before you have to run?
nah, just go watch Pony again. Keep it in the consciousness. Watch G5, watch G4. Keep streaming it wherever you stream it. That'll be. I'm just glad people still dig it.
Heck yeah. Oh, yeah, as I said, the ride never ends.
Yeah.
But thanks again, and thank you everybody for watching. We're gonna have another episode for you next week, and thank you very much for stopping by. We really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll catch y'all next time. Here's my royal wave. Adios, everybody.
Bye.